On an island in the Arabian Sea, trees grow that exist nowhere else on Earth. Their crowns spread like umbrellas, their sap bleeds red. In the old city of Sana'a, a tower house built before the Roman Empire still has a family living on the top floor. On a sand dune at the edge of the same island, a Bedouin man rides a camel past a tree shaped like a wine bottle, alone in a landscape that has no equivalent on this planet. This is not the Yemen of headlines. That Yemen exists. This one is older. 3,000 years of recorded civilization. A kingdom called Saba, whose queen crossed the Red Sea on a journey 3 religions remembered. The largest engineering work of the pre-Islamic world. Tower houses that predate the aqueducts of Rome. An island that broke from Africa 20 million years ago and grew its own world. Yemen does not contain ancient history. It is ancient history, still standing, still being spoken, still being lived. Almost no journalist has filmed the mainland in a decade. It has a 6-chapter answer. From orbit, a single dark line cuts the eastern Yemeni desert. It runs 580 meters across what was once a riverbed. The line is the broken backbone of the Marib Dam, the largest engineering work in the pre-Islamic world, raised by the Sabaean kingdom over 2,500 years ago. The dam fed an oasis large enough to support a city of 100,000 people. Roman geographers wrote about it. Sabaean inscriptions scratched into the dam's southern sluice gates still record the names of the engineers who repaired it after a flood in 450 AD. The Saba, whose queen the Hebrew, Christian, and Islamic scriptures remember as the Queen of Sheba, she rode out of this kingdom. The frankincense she carried to Solomon was harvested from trees that still grow on the mountains south of here. Roman ships came for the resin. The caravan trail from Marib to the Mediterranean was the wealthiest overland route in the ancient world. The dam collapsed in the 6th century. The empire collapsed with it. The desert took the city back. "600 kilometers west, on a plateau 2,000 meters above the sea, the empire's successor is still standing. Sana'a is among the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth. "6,000 tower houses fill its walled old quarter, some up to 9 stories, their facades decorated in white gypsum geometry over fired terracotta brick. The high-rise architecture of Sana'a was the high-rise architecture of the world for 1,000 years. The arches were finished before the Roman Empire collapsed. The windows have been swept by hands belonging to the same families for 40 generations. UNESCO recognized the old city in 1986. The Civil War began in 2014. The cameras have not gone back in. The country has not stopped existing. The Yemeni coast cuts off at the Arabian Sea. The water opens. 380 kilometers south of the mainland, a separate landmass rises from the ocean. 132 kilometers long, mostly granite, a coastline of white sand and red cliffs. Socotra Island. Politically, Yemen since 1967. Geographically, a fragment of the African continent that broke loose 20 million years ago and drifted east into the Arabian Sea. The plants that survived on it survived nowhere else. The people who settled there speak a language that branches before Arabic existed. The flights to the mainland have stopped. The flights to Socotra have not. There is one part of Yemen the cameras have always reached. It is technically Yemen. It is technically an island. It is 6 million years older than any of this.
The flight from Abu Dhabi takes 4 hours. The runway sits on the north coast of the island, a single paved strip running parallel to the sea. As the plane descends, the geography arrives in one piece. Granite peaks holding cloud at their tops, alluvial plains of red earth dropping to a coastline of white sand, the Arabian Sea reaching east toward India. Socotra is 132 kilometers long. Its population is approximately 60,000. There are no traffic lights anywhere on the island. The road network is one paved route along the north coast and a handful of unpaved tracks climbing into the interior. UNESCO recognized the entire island as a World Heritage Site in 2008, not for a single monument, but for an ecosystem that exists nowhere else on the planet. The terminal building is a low concrete shed. A handful of jeeps wait on the dirt outside. The wind smells of salt and dry grass. The drive into Hadibo takes 19 minutes. Hadibo is Socotra's only town. Its population is approximately 8,000. There is no second floor on most buildings. There are no traffic lights. There is one fish market that opens at 5 in the morning and closes at 7. There is one mosque whose call to prayer is the loudest sound the town produces between dawn and dusk. The rest of the island is villages, clusters of stone houses scattered through the highlands and along the coast, connected by tracks the goats use as often as the people. The Socotri families who live in them follow the same seasonal rhythms their ancestors followed 2,000 years ago. The economy runs on fishing, goat herding, frankincense tapping, and the occasional foreign tourist with the patience to reach Hadibo by way of an Emirati transit visa and a once-a-week charter flight. The road south climbs into the interior. The interior is where the island stops being Yemen and starts being itself. The geology underlies everything. Socotra broke from the African mainland between 18 and 20 million years ago, then drifted east into the Arabian Sea. It has been geographically isolated for 6 million years, long enough for natural selection to operate without genetic input from anywhere else, long enough for entire branches of botanical evolution to follow paths the rest of the world never took. Over 700 plant species live on Socotra. 37% of them exist nowhere else on Earth. By comparison, Madagascar's endemism rate is 40%. The Galapagos is around 30. Socotra is the third most botanically distinct island in the world. The closest evolutionary parallels are continents that have been isolated for similar lengths of time. The closest cultural parallel is nothing. No other inhabited island combines this scale of endemism with 2,000 years of continuous human presence. The road from Hadibo climbs through dry scrub, through limestone outcrops, through bare red earth. After 90 minutes, it levels onto a plateau 700 meters above the sea. What grew there grew differently. What survived there survived nowhere else. The first thing the visitor sees is the tree.
The road south from Hadibo climbs slowly. The coastal palms thin out. The granite rises through the scrub. After 90 minutes, the road levels onto a tableland of pale limestone and red earth, 700 meters above the sea. Diksam. In every direction, the upside-down umbrellas of dragon's blood trees rise from the ground. Each canopy 2 to 3 meters across, each trunk twisted, each crown spread flat as if balancing a tray. The plateau holds the densest concentration of mature specimens on the island. The unpaved track across it is barely a track. Goats wander between the trees, eating the lower branches. The wind moves through the canopies and makes no sound the visitor recognizes. This forest has been growing here since before the first pharaoh was buried. A track east leads to Firmin. If Diksam is the plateau, Firmin is the heart of it. The grove sits in a natural amphitheater below the Hagahur Ridge, a basin of red soil and pale limestone holding several hundred mature dragon's blood trees in their full umbrella form. The canopies overlap. The light below them is filtered and red. The oldest specimens here are over 300 years old, dated by dendrochronology of fallen trees of comparable size. The dragon's blood does not grow in straight lines. The trunks split early, twist outward, and meet at the top in a single hemispheric crown. The form is structural. The canopy collects the morning fog that condenses on the high plateau, channels the moisture down the trunk, and irrigates the roots in a climate that gets less than 300 millimeters of rain a year. The trees are in slow decline. The climate is drying. The saplings struggle in soil that no longer holds water the way it did. What stands in Firmin is mostly already old. The tree itself is the explanation. A knife enters the bark of a dragon's blood trunk at chest height. The cut is shallow. After a moment, a thick red liquid wells in the wound, viscous, slow, the color of arterial blood. The species is Dracaena cinnabari. Its name comes from cinnabar, the same red pigment Roman painters used. The resin was traded as a luxury good through the Hadramaut to the Mediterranean from the 1st century BC. Romans used it as varnish for stringed instruments, as pigment for wall murals, as a medical astringent. Pliny the Elder described the substance in his Natural History without ever seeing the tree it came from. The dragon's blood resin was so prized in medieval Europe that violin makers still call the warm red lacquer on their instruments dragon's blood, 2,000 years after the species was first tapped. The tree gives the resin only when wounded. The wound heals. The cycle repeats. On Socotra, harvesters have been working the trees the same way for at least 2 millennia. The Roman Empire is gone. The tree is still here. Not far from the dragon's blood, on the wind-swept ridges where the soil thins to almost nothing, a different endemic takes over. The Socotra bottle tree. Trunk swollen like an inverted bowl, leaves sparse, pink flowers in season.
The swollen trunk holds water for the dry months. Cousins of the species exist on the African mainland, but the Socotra variant grew large and squat in isolation, evolving in directions its mainland relatives never followed. Beside it, on the same ridge, the desert rose, the same family, smaller scale, equally improbable, blooming bright magenta out of pale rock. The botanical record on Socotra reads like a fragment of a parallel evolution. The umbrella trees, the bottle trees, the roses on the cliff. 6 million years of isolation produced this. Nothing about it is from anywhere else. The trees stop at the cliff edge. Below the cliff, water arrives.
The escarpment at the western end of the Dixam Plateau drops 900 meters to the coastal plain. The road follows a slow series of switchbacks down through scrub and bare rock. By the time it levels at the bottom, the sea is in front of the windshield, and the landscape has changed completely. Detwa Lagoon arrives without warning. A protected body of water, 2 kilometers across at its widest, separated from the open ocean by a single curving sand spit. At low tide, the lagoon is shallow enough to wade across. The water shifts from turquoise to pale jade in bands that follow the contour of the seabed. At high tide, juvenile reef fish from 15 species shelter inside the spit, riding out the day before returning to the deeper water beyond. Sea turtles nest on the sand between April and August, the females climbing the spit at night and laying clutches that hatch 6 weeks later, the hatchlings making the run to the sea at dawn. Detwa is recognized by the Ramsar Convention, the same wetlands protection that covers the Camargue in France and the Okavango Delta in Botswana. The Socotri families who fish the lagoon work it with hand lines and small wooden boats. The catch is local. The lagoon has never been industrially fished. West along the coast, the shoreline gets more dramatic. Kalancia is Socotra's second town. Its population is around 4,000. It sits at the western end of the island, reached by a single unpaved road that washes out in the monsoon. The town centers on a small fishing harbor, where wooden dhows return at dawn loaded with the night's catch. Kingfish, tuna, the occasional barracuda. Beyond the harbor, the coast bends north into a series of bays cut into the granite, each one a little wilder than the last. The most dramatic is Shoab. Shoab Beach sits at the western tip of the island, accessible only by boat or by walking the cliff path. The beach itself is 3 kilometers of white sand, 100 meters wide. The water graduating from clear to teal to deep blue in a steeper drop than the eye expects. The bay shelters a small resident population of bottlenose dolphins that the Kalancia fishermen know by behavior. The morning patterns of the lead male, the calving season of the larger females, but not by individual name. The dolphins have no use for names. They have used the same bay for at least as long as anyone has counted. The coast bends back east. On the northern shore, the geography reverses. The desert meets the sea, and the sand starts to climb. The Aha dunes do not look like other dunes. A 200-meter cliff of red sandstone rises straight from the sea on the eastern coast of the island. At its base, white sand banks against the rock in clean curves, driven there by the southwest monsoon. which arrives in May and runs until September, with winds strong enough to ground every flight to the island. The monsoon picks sand off the beach below, carries it inland, and forces it up against the cliff face. Over centuries, the dunes have climbed nearly to the top of the cliff. From above, they look like fingers of pale grain reaching for the ridge. At the base of the dunes, a freshwater spring runs through the rock, the only one for several kilometers in either direction. A grove of date palms survives around the spring, surrounded on three sides by sand. A handful of Bedouin families graze goats here in the early morning, before the sun arrives.
The road south from Arhur climbs into the Haggahur Range. The granite walls rise on either side, jagged and dark, cut by valleys that hold mist until midday. The highest peak is Mashanig, 1,503 meters above the sea. Bare summit, no trees. The rock surface scored by 100 million years of weather. The Haggahur Mountains form the spine of Socotra's western half. The granite that builds them is Precambrian, over 540 million years old, older than the breakup of Gondwana, older than every cell of fossilized life embedded in the limestone of the plains below. The mountains predate the island itself. When Socotra broke from the African mainland 20 million years ago, the Haggahur came with it as a fragment of the African shield. The lower slopes hold endemic frankincense, Boswellia socotrana, a separate species from the Omani Boswellia that built the trade routes to the Mediterranean. The Socotri have tapped it for at least 2,000 years. The fog that condenses on the peaks irrigates the valleys below. The cycle has held without interruption for as long as the island has existed. On the eastern flank of the same range, the granite opens into a cave. Hawk Cave runs 3 kilometers into the limestone of eastern Socotra. The entrance is a slot in the cliff face, 20 meters above the coastal plain, reached by an hour's walk up a rocky path. Inside, the cave opens into chambers the height of a cathedral, the floors littered with stalagmites the diameter of pillars, the ceilings dripping water that has filtered through limestone for thousands of years to land in pools of still, cold mineral water. "250 inscriptions cover the cave walls. They are written in Brahmi, the script of ancient India. In South Arabian, the alphabet of the Sabaean kingdom. In Aksumite Ge'ez, the language of the Ethiopian highlands. In Greek, in Palmyrene Aramaic, in scripts whose modern speakers are nobody. The earliest date from the 1st century BC, the latest from the 6th century AD. They were left by sailors waiting out the monsoon, Indian merchants en route to the Roman Mediterranean, Aksumite captains carrying ivory from the African highlands, Greek speakers from Alexandria, South Arabians from the kingdom of Saba, all of them taking shelter on this island for the 4 months the trade winds reversed, all of them carving the names of their ships, their patron gods, and their home ports into the same wall. Socotra was a junction. The cave is the proof. 2 kilometers south, the Home Hill escarpment holds the last of the day's endemic concentration. A natural infinity edge pool sits on the eastern escarpment of Home Hill. Turquoise water held in a bowl of pale granite, the cliff dropping 50 meters to the coastal plain beyond. the open sea reaching east toward Oman. Home Hill holds the most concentrated endemic species zone on the island. Within a single kilometer, dragon's blood trees, bottle trees, frankincense, the rare Socotra fig, Dorstenia gigas, whose swollen trunk and umbrella crown look like a smaller, fleshier cousin of the dragon's blood. Each species is endemic. Each one has evolved in a microclimate the rest of the world has never reproduced. The Socotri Bedouin families who manage the protected area still graze goats on the lower slopes, as their families have done for centuries. The conservation model that holds for the rest of the world, fence off the rare, exclude the human, has never been applied here. The people are the conservators. The names on the cave wall are from 10 different empires. None of those empires exists anymore. The people who live on this island still do.
The road into the Dixum Highlands ends at a cluster of stone houses on the edge of a meadow. Wood smoke rises from a single fire. A woman in deep red textile carries water from a cistern carved into the rock. Two boys move a small herd of goats across the slope toward higher pasture. This is a Socotri Bedouin village. The families here have lived on the island for at least 2,000 years. The genetic record suggests far longer, settlement predating the rise of any Arab civilization on the mainland. The lineages in the Haggahur Highlands are pastoral, cave-dwelling in winter, tent-dwelling in summer. They graze goats, they harvest the dragon's blood resin, they name individual trees, they name individual goats. The Socotri population numbers around 60,000 across the whole island. They identify by family, by village, and by the slope of mountain their ancestors are buried in. Outsider categories, Arab, Yemeni, Muslim, apply, but loosely, and at the back of the list. The first identity is Socotri. They have lived here long enough that their language stopped being the world's language and became their own. A Socotri elder speaks. The audio is low. The subtitles do not arrive in time. The shape of the words is unfamiliar. Socotri is a modern South Arabian language. Its branch separated from Proto-South Semitic before Arabic existed, before the Arabic alphabet, before the Quran, before the Kingdom of Saba reached its peak. Socotri carries grammatical structures lost from every other living Semitic language. Its closest relatives are spoken by tiny communities in the mountains of southern Oman, and they are mutually unintelligible. Socotri has only been written down systematically since the 21st century. Linguists from Russia and France worked with Socotri elders for 2 decades to develop an Arabic script orthography. There are no native speakers under the age of 20 in Hadibo. The language is alive in the highland villages. It is endangered everywhere else. What is being lost is not poetry or folklore. The Socotri vocabulary for the dragon's blood tree distinguishes 13 separate stages of its life cycle. The grammar contains a verbal tense for events that happened before any living memory and continue to affect the present. The language is technology for an ecosystem and a way of being in it. Each lost word is a piece of accumulated noticing
that took 2,000 years to assemble. What survives on the island is what was here before the mainland was named. Cut back to Sana'a. The same tower house, the same window, the same gypsum geometry around the arch. The family still lives on the top floor. The civil war that began in 2014 is in its 12th year. The country is not on the news this week. The dragon's blood tree on the Dixum Plateau is still bleeding when the bark is cut. The Sokotri elders are still teaching the language to their grandchildren in the highland villages. The cave inscriptions in Hok still hold the names of sailors from 10 dead empires. The Bedouin on the Arhur dunes is still riding past the bottle tree. Yemen is not a country the world forgot to visit. It is the country that was here before the world began. The civilization is still here, still being spoken, still being lived.
The island shrinks below. Granite spine, red coast, the umbrella forest of Dixum fading into texture. The Arabian Sea opening west toward the mainland that the cameras no longer reach. We began with 3 images. A dragon's blood tree bleeding red on a plateau. A tower house in Sana'a still occupied after 25 centuries. A Bedouin riding past a bottle tree on a dune. Each older than the country they are technically in. Each here before the news cycle existed. Each here after it ends. The kingdom of Saba is gone. The Marib Dam is rubble. The Roman ships that came for frankincense are at the bottom of the sea. The empires whose sailors carved their names into Hawk Cave are all dead. Yemen is still here. 3,000 years of ancient civilization, still standing, still being spoken, still being lived. The oldest Yemen, still here.